June 1944. The hedgerows of Normandy stood thick and impenetrable, centuries-old earthen walls lined with dense brush and trees. For American infantry pushing inland from the beaches, the bocage was both shield and trap. The ground was wet with morning dew, the air heavy with cordite and smoke. Soldiers crouched low, rifles ready, their eyes fixed on the narrow lanes cut between fields. Behind them came the low, grinding roar of tank tracks. The M4 Sherman was advancing. Its engine throbbed, its turret scanning left and right, the barrel of its 75mm gun cutting a silhouette against the rising sun. Infantrymen clung to the sides of the tank for protection, ducking behind its steel hull as machine gun fire rattled in the distance. For these men the Sherman was more than a machine. It was a moving wall of iron, a promise of firepower when German resistance stiffened. They trusted it, even as they whispered jokes about its thin armor and its unnerving tendency to burn when hit. In Normandy's winding lanes, they needed it to push through the hedgerows, to absorb fire, to be the spearhead of the advance. The rumble of Shermans became the rhythm of the American drive inland. But on this morning, another sound reached their ears deeper, more menacing. From the tree line ahead, a low growl rose into a metallic roar. The ground seemed to vibrate under its weight. German Tiger tanks were moving into position. At 57 tons, the Tiger was not subtle. Branches snapped, earth shook, and its massive silhouette emerged from the mist like a predator from its lair. To Allied tankers, the very name Tiger carried dread. It was said to be invincible, a fortress on tracks, able to destroy a Sherman long before the American tank could even fire back. Its long-barreled 88mm gun was infamous, a weapon capable of piercing Allied armor at distances that defied belief. The first sight of a Tiger on the battlefield was unforgettable. Its flat, angular armor reflected the morning light, its turret traversing with slow confidence, as if it had no fear of what lay before it. Inside their Shermans, American crews felt their throats tighten. They knew their 75mm guns would struggle to penetrate that armor. They knew the Tiger's first shot might be their last. And yet they pressed forward, because there were more Shermans than Tigers, and the battle could not be won without them. The M4 Sherman was not born from a quest for perfection, but from necessity. When the United States entered the Second World War, its armored forces were woefully underprepared. The interwar years had seen little investment in modern tanks, and America's first engagements in North Africa in 1942 made it clear that a reliable, mass-producible vehicle was essential if the Allies were to compete with Germany's seasoned panzer divisions. Out of this urgency emerged the Sherman, a tank designed not to be invincible, but to be practical. Everything about the Sherman reflected balance over excess. Its 75mm M3 gun was versatile, able to blast enemy infantry positions, bunkers, and lighter armored vehicles with deadly efficiency. Against Germany's heavier machines, the gun sometimes fell short, but the Sherman was never meant to fight alone. Its armor was moderate, thick enough to withstand small arms fire and lighter anti-tank weapons, but not so heavy that it slowed the vehicle or complicated production. Its gasoline-powered engine was loud and at times temperamental, but it could be maintained by soldiers in the field with basic tools, an advantage that meant Shermans kept moving when German tanks often sat silent, waiting for specialized crews. The Sherman's greatest strength was not in a single feature, but in its adaptability. From the moment it rolled into combat, engineers and commanders sought ways to improve it. Some variants were equipped with a high-velocity 76mm gun capable of penetrating German armor at greater ranges. Others carried the British 17-pounder, transforming the Sherman into the feared Firefly, a tank that even the Tiger had to respect. Specialized versions appeared with flamethrowers, rocket launchers, or amphibious modifications for beach landings. The Sherman was a chassis that could be reimagined to meet any battlefield requirement, a quality no German tank could match. But the true story of the Sherman was written not in its design specifications, but in the staggering scale of its production. By the war's end, nearly 49, 0 Shermans had rolled off American assembly lines more than all the tanks Germany produced of every type combined. Factories across the United States retooled overnight, their assembly lines once dedicated to cars, farm machinery, or steel production now turning out tanks in endless rows. This industrial miracle ensured that wherever American or Allied soldiers fought, Shermans would be there with them. A German tanker might boast that a Tiger could destroy a Sherman in one shot, and often it could. But for every Sherman destroyed, there were dozens more waiting to take its place. American commanders did not send their tanks into battle expecting each to survive. They sent them forward, knowing that, like the soldiers who fought alongside them, the Shermans were part of a system far larger than any individual duel. The Tiger may have been a fortress, but the Sherman was an army. And in a war defined by attrition and logistics, that distinction mattered more than armor thickness or gun caliber. The German Tiger first appeared on the battlefields of the Eastern Front in 1942, a response to a sobering reality. In the opening months of Operation Barbarossa, German panzer crews had encountered the Soviet T-34 and KV-1 tanks with sloped armor and heavy guns that shocked an army accustomed to easy victories. For the first time, the Wehrmacht faced armored opponents their Panzer III and IV struggled to defeat. The Tiger was the answer, a machine designed not with compromise, but with overwhelming battlefield dominance in mind. At nearly 57 tons, the Tiger was a behemoth compared to its contemporaries. Its defining feature was its main armament, the 88mm K36L, 56 gun, derived from the dreaded German 88, an anti-aircraft and anti-tank weapon already feared across Europe. The Tiger's cannon could annihilate enemy tanks at distances well over a kilometer. Soviet crews spoke with horror of shells that cut through their armor as though it were paper, long before they were close enough to return fire. Against American Shermans, the effect was even more devastating. A Tiger positioned on high ground or in ambush could destroy wave after wave of enemy tanks, its long barrel spitting fire with calm, mechanical precision. Its armor was equally formidable. With up to 120 millimeters of hardened steel at the front, the Tiger was all but invulnerable to the standard 75mm guns of Allied tanks. American and British shells often bounced harmlessly off its plates, leaving little more than sparks and dents. For its five-man crew, the Tiger was not simply a tank but a fortress, a moving bastion of steel that gave them a sense of invincibility. German tankers who stepped into the Tiger's cramped interior felt a mixture of pride and confidence they were commanding the most feared machine of the war. This aura of invulnerability was amplified by German propaganda. Newsreels trumpeted the Tiger as a superweapon, a tank that could hold off entire Allied battalions. Tales of Tiger aces, like Michael Whitman at Villers-Bocage, reinforced the myth. In a single morning in June 1944, Whitman's Tiger destroyed more than 24 British tanks and vehicles, cementing the Tiger's reputation as unstoppable. Whether exaggerated or not, such stories spread quickly, feeding both German morale and Allied anxiety. Among Allied tank crews, the Tiger was a name spoken with dread. American Sherman crews, painfully aware of their own vulnerabilities, nicknamed their vehicles Ronsons after the cigarette lighter that lights up the first time, every time. A hit from the Tiger's 88 often meant a Sherman would burst into flames within seconds, giving its crew little chance to escape. For the infantry advancing alongside them, the sight of a Tiger emerging from the tree line was a moment of terror. Its silhouette, tall, boxy, unmistakable, seemed to promise death. For all its fearsome reputation, the Tiger carried within it the seeds of its own downfall. Behind the thick armor and long-barreled gun was a machine so heavy, so complex, and so demanding that it often became a burden as much as a weapon. On paper, the Tiger looked invincible. In practice, it was often betrayed by its own design. At nearly 57 tons, the Tiger was one of the heaviest tanks of its era. This sheer bulk created endless logistical problems. Many of Europe's bridges could not support its weight, forcing engineers to lay down makeshift crossings or reroute entire units. In muddy fields or snowbound forests, the Tiger often bogged down, its massive treads churning helplessly until recovery vehicles were summoned. But recovery was rarely simple. The Tiger required specialized towing equipment and sometimes 2 or even 3 vehicles to haul it free. If those weren't available, the crew might be forced to destroy their own tank to prevent its capture. Its complexity only added to the strain. The Tiger's Maybach engine guzzled fuel at a staggering rate, burning through precious supplies Germany could ill afford by 1943 and 1944. For every 100 hours of combat, the Tiger demanded nearly 300 hours of maintenance. Its intricate transmission and suspension system, with overlapping road wheels, was prone to clogging with mud and ice, especially on the eastern front. Crews spent as much time repairing their vehicles as they did fighting in them. German mechanics joked grimly that a Tiger broke down as often as it fired its gun. Then there was the issue of production. Building a Tiger was no small feat. Each one required immense quantities of steel, skilled labor, and countless man-hours in factories already strained by Allied bombing. By war's end, only about 350 Tiger I tanks had been built, joined by some 500 Tiger Is. To put that in perspective, American factories could build that many Shermans in just a few weeks. Where the Tiger consumed time and resources, the Sherman rolled off assembly lines like clockwork, simple, standardized, and replaceable. Even on the battlefield, the Tiger's supposed invulnerability came with limits. While its frontal armor could shrug off most Allied shells, its sides and rear were more vulnerable, especially to the upgraded 76mm guns of later Shermans or the devastating 17-pounder carried by British Fireflies. Aircraft posed an even greater threat. The P-47 Thunderbolt and Typhoon fighter bombers prowled the skies over Normandy, their rockets and bombs reducing the Tiger's armor advantage to nothing. German crews feared the scream of aircraft engines overhead more than the sight of enemy tanks. For Allied soldiers, the Tiger remained terrifying, but the closer the war drew to its climax, the clearer its flaws became. It was too heavy to maneuver freely, too complex to maintain efficiently, and too scarce to matter in a war of attrition. The Tiger was a weapon of legend, but also a symbol of a broader German problem, the pursuit of engineering perfection at the cost of practicality. The hedgerows of Normandy were not just fields, they were fortresses. Thick earthen embankments, centuries old and overgrown with brush, turned every lane into a potential killing ground. When Shermans pushed forward in the summer of 1944, their crews often found themselves in duels they had not chosen. Somewhere beyond the next bend, hidden behind hedgerows or in the shadows of orchards, a Tiger might be waiting. For the Sherman crews, it was like playing dice with death. The Tiger's advantage was clear from the moment the first duels began. At Villers-Bocage, the young German commander Michael Wittmann and his Tiger I rolled into action against a column of British armor. In less than half an hour, he and his crew destroyed more than 20 tanks and vehicles, halting an entire advance almost single-handedly. Stories like Wittmann's raced across the Allied lines, feeding the Tiger's aura of invincibility. Every Sherman crew knew the truth. If a Tiger caught them at long range, their chances of survival were slim. Yet Normandy was not a battlefield of wide-open steppes or deserts. It was close, constricted, and filled with cover. This gave the Allies a chance. Instead of fighting Tigers in open duels, they learned to overwhelm them with numbers and tactics. Shermans swarmed in groups, circling around hedgerows to strike from multiple sides. Infantry accompanied them closely, moving through the undergrowth to flush out ambushes. When a Tiger appeared, artillery batteries were often called down within minutes, saturating the area with shells. And above all, the skies belonged to the Allies. Fighter bombers prowled the countryside, and the scream of a rocket attack could end even the most confident Tiger's advance. One American tanker later recalled, "When we heard there was a Tiger ahead, we never thought of one Sherman against it. We thought in terms of 10 Shermans, artillery, and the Air Corps. That's how you killed a Tiger." His words reflected the new reality. A Tiger might knock out several Shermans in quick succession, but the Allied response was relentless. For every Sherman that burned, there were more waiting just down the road, and the Tiger could never stand against all of them. Still, the cost was high. In the Bocage, Shermans were knocked out in droves, their hulks littering the fields, black smoke curling into the sky. Crews bailed out under fire, sometimes surviving, often not. The Tiger made every engagement a gamble, and Allied soldiers respected its lethality even as they learned to counter it. Slowly, painfully, the balance began to shift. For all its power, the Tiger was rare, a blunt instrument in a war where speed and numbers mattered most. The Sherman, though individually weaker, was always there in greater strength. In Normandy, that reality began to tell. The Tiger might win the duel, but the Sherman was winning the campaign. The Tiger's battlefield record was impressive on paper. German tank commanders reported kill ratios that seemed almost unbelievable. 5, 10, even 15 Shermans destroyed for every Tiger lost. In the controlled chaos of a duel, the Tiger often emerged as the victor, its 88mm gun knocking out enemy tanks before they could close the distance. But in the wider reality of the war, those ratios meant little. War is not fought in isolated duels. It is fought in campaigns of months and years, where factories matter as much as firepower, and in that cold arithmetic, the Tiger was hopelessly outmatched. By 1944, American factories had become the arsenal of democracy in more than name. Industrial lines in Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago churned out Shermans with a rhythm that no German plant could hope to match. At the height of production, the United States was delivering more than 2.0 Shermans every month. That meant entire battalions could be re-equipped in a matter of weeks, their losses made good almost before the smoke had cleared from the battlefield. If a Sherman was knocked out on Tuesday, its replacement might already be on a ship crossing the Atlantic by Thursday. The Tiger, by contrast, was irreplaceable once lost. Each one required immense resources to build. Specialized steel, skilled labor, and long hours in factories already straining under Allied bombing. Producing a single Tiger demanded the same industrial effort as several Panzer IVs or half a dozen assault guns. In total, only around 350 Tiger I tanks and roughly 500 Tiger IIs were ever built. Fewer than 2.0 of all variants rolled into combat during the entire war. America built that many Shermans in less than a month. By the time the Allies were storming the beaches of Normandy, nearly 50.0 Shermans had been produced. Against that tide, even the Tiger's terrifying kill ratios were drops in the ocean. The consequences were visible on the battlefield. An American armored division might field hundreds of Shermans, supported by tank destroyers and air power. A German heavy tank battalion, by contrast, often deployed with fewer than 40 Tigers, and many of those were sidelined by breakdowns or fuel shortages before ever reaching combat. Once a Tiger was destroyed or abandoned, its absence was felt immediately, because Germany had no means to replace it quickly. The Sherman, on the other hand, was never alone. If one burned in the hedgerows, another was close behind, its crew ready to continue the advance. This imbalance of numbers shaped the psychology of the war. For Allied crews, the Tiger was terrifying but rare. For German crews, the Sherman was less fearsome individually, but endless in number. The Tiger could dominate a battlefield for an hour, a day, perhaps even a week. But the Sherman, multiplied by tens of thousands, dominated the war itself. In the end, the math was merciless. Germany built fewer than 2.0 Tigers. America built nearly 50.0 Shermans. That simple equation mattered more than any kill ratio ever could. For all its armor and firepower, the Tiger carried with it a constant shadow: unreliability. Its reputation as a battlefield terror was undercut by its tendency to fail its own crew long before the enemy could. Mechanical breakdowns, fuel shortages, and maintenance demands plagued the Tiger from the moment it left the factory. In contrast, the Sherman was not only easy to build, it was easy to keep running. On the battlefield, that difference meant survival. A Tiger demanded care like a temperamental giant. Its Maybach HL2 130 engine, powerful but delicate, overheated frequently under strain. Transmissions shattered, clutches burned out, and the overlapping road wheels that gave the Tiger its distinctive look were magnets for mud, rocks, and ice. In the Russian winter, Tigers sometimes froze in place, immobilized not by enemy fire but by the elements. Even when functioning, its enormous weight wore down components at alarming rates. German crews often joked bitterly that the Tiger required as many mechanics as gunners, and in many cases, they were not far off. The Sherman, on the other hand, was designed for soldiers, not engineers. Its parts were standardized, its systems simple, and its engines, whether gasoline or later diesel variants, were reliable in every climate from North Africa's deserts to Europe's rain-soaked fields. If a Sherman broke down, it could be fixed quickly using parts from another. Entire battalions of mechanics carried interchangeable components, so a crippled Sherman might be back in action within hours. The Tiger had no such luxury. If its transmission failed deep in enemy territory, the crew's best option was often to scuttle it and retreat on foot. Many of the Tigers captured by the Allies during the war were not destroyed in combat, but abandoned after breakdowns. The Falaise Pocket in August 1944 offered a striking example. As German forces retreated under relentless Allied pressure, the roads were littered with burned-out and disabled Tigers. Some had been destroyed by air attack, but many more had been left behind after mechanical failures or simply running out of fuel. For German crews, watching their mighty machines reduced to useless hulks was demoralizing. For Allied soldiers, it was a reminder that even the most feared tank in the world could not escape the practical limits of war. This contrast between reliability and fragility shaped battlefield tactics. American commanders knew they could rely on their Shermans to keep advancing, day after day. German commanders with Tigers had to plan around their tanks' limitations, deploying them sparingly, often holding them back for ambushes or counterattacks rather than risking long marches. The Tiger could dominate a fight when everything went right, but it rarely did. The Sherman could not match its raw power, but it could be counted on, and in war, certainty was often the deadliest weapon. War is a contest not only of men and machines, but of adaptation. Both the Sherman and the Tiger evolved as the conflict raged, each side seeking an edge over the other. For Germany, this meant doubling down on the philosophy of raw firepower and armor. For the Allies, it meant refining and modifying a design that was already everywhere on the battlefield. The result was two diverging paths, one pursuing perfection, the other embracing practicality. The Sherman's original 75mm gun had served well in North Africa and the early campaigns in Italy, where German Panzer IIIs and IVs were the most common opponents. But in Normandy, against Panthers and Tigers, the 75mm often proved inadequate. Crews watched shells bounce harmlessly off thick German armor, and frustration grew. The U.S. Army responded by fielding new models of the Sherman equipped with a high-velocity 76mm gun. Though still not ideal against a Tiger's frontal plates, the 76mm offered better penetration at range and gave American crews a fighting chance when flanking. The upgrade was simple, requiring no redesign of the chassis, exactly the kind of efficient adaptation the Sherman had been built for. Meanwhile, the British approached the problem in their own way. They mounted their formidable 17-pounder anti-tank gun into the Sherman, creating the Sherman Firefly. This weapon could pierce a Tiger's armor at long distances, turning the tables in many duels. German crews quickly learned to fear the Firefly, often targeting it first when spotting a group of Shermans. Its long barrel, jutting far beyond the hull, made it easy to identify and dangerous to ignore. For the first time, the Allies had a Sherman variant that could go toe-to-toe with Germany's heaviest tanks on equal terms. Germany's answer was the Tiger II, also known as the Königstiger or King Tiger. If the Tiger I had been a fortress, the Tiger II was a citadel. Its armor reached an astonishing 150mm at the front, sloped to deflect shells, while its long-barreled 88mm Quake 43 gun was among the most powerful tank weapons of the war. On paper, the Tiger II was invincible, able to destroy any Allied tank from almost any angle at almost any range. To its crews, it was the pinnacle of armored warfare. But this perfection came at a cost. The Tiger II weighed nearly 70 tons, straining its already fragile drivetrain. Its engine was underpowered for such mass, its reliability even worse than the Tiger I. Many never saw combat, breaking down on the march or consuming their fuel long before reaching the front. Those that did fight could dominate in small engagements, but like their predecessors, they were too few in number, too costly to replace, and too vulnerable to the broader reality of Allied combined arms. The Sherman's evolution reflected Allied pragmatism: modify, adapt, and produce in numbers. The Tiger's evolution reflected Germany's obsession with battlefield dominance, producing machines that dazzled but could not endure. In the clash of philosophies, one tank became legendary, the other became decisive. The Tiger and the Sherman were more than tanks, they were reflections of the nations that built them. Behind every duel in the hedgerows of Normandy or the frozen roads of the Ardennes stood two very different approaches to war. Germany pursued weapons of awe, marvels of engineering that could dominate a battlefield in isolation. The United States pursued weapons of utility, machines that could be produced, maintained, and fielded in overwhelming numbers. On the battlefield, those philosophies collided, and the outcome revealed the deeper truth of industrial war in the 20th century. For Germany, the Tiger was a symbol of ambition. It embodied the belief that a single superior weapon could reverse the tide of war. Yet the very traits that made it formidable, its thick armor, massive gun, and complex design, also made it unsustainable. Every Tiger required precious raw materials Germany could scarcely afford, as Allied bombing campaigns shredded factories and rail lines. Skilled labor was needed to assemble them, but by 1944, many of those workers had been conscripted or lost to the front. The Tiger was, in many ways, a weapon Germany could not afford to build, yet felt compelled to produce in the hope of regaining battlefield initiative. The United States, by contrast, had embraced standardization and efficiency. Factories that once produced automobiles or farm equipment were converted to build Shermans in endless rows. Parts were interchangeable, blueprints simplified, and supply chains stretched across an ocean without faltering. A Sherman destroyed in combat could be replaced within weeks. A Tiger destroyed might never be replaced at all. This disparity went beyond tanks. It was the story of trucks, aircraft, artillery, and even ammunition. For every round fired by a Tiger's 88mm gun, American factories produced dozens of 75mm and 76mm shells for Shermans, ensuring the flow of firepower never ceased. This industrial divide shaped doctrine as well. German commanders deployed Tigers as independent shock units, battering rams intended to blunt Allied offensives. The Allies deployed Shermans as part of a larger system, combined arms warfare that included artillery barrages, close air support, and infantry coordination. A Tiger might dominate in a duel, but the Sherman existed as one piece in a greater whole, supported by the weight of an economy geared entirely for war. In practice, this meant that while German crews lived and died by the performance of their machines, American crews lived and fought within a system designed to absorb losses and continue pressing forward. By 1944, the imbalance had become stark. Germany could field a handful of heavy tank battalions, each with a few dozen Tigers at most. The Allies could equip entire divisions with hundreds of Shermans and still have thousands more in reserve. The Tiger inspired fear, but the Sherman embodied inevitability. Germany's pursuit of engineering perfection clashed with America's pursuit of industrial efficiency, and in a war of attrition, it was efficiency that proved decisive. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, the Tiger's legacy loomed far larger than its actual numbers. With fewer than 0 built across both Tiger I and Tiger II variants, it had been a rare presence on the battlefield, but its reputation outlived its service. To Allied tankers, the memory of facing a Tiger remained vivid. The flash of its 88mm gun, the sparks of shells bouncing off its armor, the dread that spread when scouts whispered of its silhouette beyond the hedgerows. Even when destroyed or abandoned, the sight of a Tiger evoked awe. It had been a machine built as much for psychological warfare as for combat. For German crews, the Tiger represented pride and fear in equal measure. Serving in one was considered elite, a mark of skill and courage. Its crews were lionized in propaganda films, their victories exaggerated into legends. Names like Michael Whitman became mythic, his Tiger's rampage at Villers-Bocage retold as proof of the tank's supposed invincibility. In reality, Whitman and many others eventually met their end in their Tigers, destroyed not by inferiority in combat, but by the relentless inevitability of numbers, artillery, and air power. Still, their stories lingered, reinforcing the Tiger's aura of deadliness. Yet the Tiger's shortcomings were as much a part of its legacy as its strengths. Post-war analysis revealed just how impractical it had been. It guzzled fuel, broke down frequently, and consumed resources Germany desperately needed elsewhere. For every Tiger that fought, dozens of Panzer IVs or assault guns might have been built instead, weapons that could have been fielded in far greater numbers. Even so, the Tiger remained fixed in popular memory not as a symbol of failure, but as an icon of German engineering, fearsome, imposing, and unforgettable. In the years after the war, the Tiger became the subject of fascination for historians, model makers, and filmmakers alike. Only a handful survived intact, displayed in museums where visitors still marvel at their massive size and thick armor plates. Veterans who had fought against them often recalled the terror of hearing an 88mm shell scream overhead or watching Shermans ignite under its fire. That fear translated into legend, and the Tiger became shorthand for German armoured might. In truth, its battlefield impact was limited by its scarcity and unreliability, but perception is often more powerful than statistics. For many Allied soldiers, the Tiger embodied the deadliest challenge they could face on the battlefield. For Germany, it represented both their ambition and their overreach, a weapon too advanced to be produced in numbers, too complex to be sustained in a total war. Its legacy remains one of contradiction, a tank that terrified thousands but could not change the war's outcome. Even today, when enthusiasts speak of World War II armour, the Tiger is often the first name mentioned. It was not the most practical tank, nor the most influential, but it was unforgettable. In that sense, its myth became its true weapon, one that has endured far longer than the steel from which it was built. If the Tiger became legend, the Sherman became history. When the war ended, its silhouette was etched into the memory of every soldier who had fought in Europe, North Africa, or the Pacific. It was the tank that was always there, leading convoys through the hedgerows of Normandy, churning across the sands of El Alamein, rumbling through ruined villages in Italy, or cresting the frozen hills of the Ardennes. Where the Tiger was rare, almost mythical, the Sherman was ubiquitous. It did not need to be feared to be decisive. It only needed to be present, and it was present everywhere. The Sherman's greatest legacy was its sheer versatility. Designed as a medium tank, it became a platform for countless adaptations. Variants carried the British 17-pounder gun, transforming them into fireflies that could slay tigers and panthers. Others mounted flamethrowers to clear bunkers, rocket launchers to bombard fortifications, or amphibious gear to swim ashore on D-Day. Recovery vehicles, mine-clearing versions, self-propelled artillery, all emerged from the same chassis. The Sherman proved not only reliable but endlessly adaptable, a reflection of the Allied approach to warfare. Practical solutions applied on an industrial scale. Its post-war service underscored that adaptability. While Germany's surviving Tigers were scrapped, too complex and costly to maintain, Shermans rolled on into new conflicts. They fought in Korea, where US forces once again faced Soviet-designed armor. They served in the armies of France, Britain, and Canada long after 1945. Israel used them in the wars of the Middle East, refitting and upgrading them well into the 1960s and 70s. Even nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America employed Shermans as they sought to rebuild their militaries after the devastation of global conflict. Few tanks in history have served as widely or as long. Among veterans, the Sherman inspired mixed emotions. To some, it was a death trap, too lightly armored to face German heavy tanks head-on. To others, it was a trusted companion, a machine that started when needed, could be repaired with ease, and gave them a fighting chance to live another day. One veteran remarked, "We cursed it, we doubted it, but we always had it. That mattered more than anything." The Tiger might win duels, but the Sherman carried men to victory across continents. The Sherman's legacy is also symbolic. It embodied the American war effort, not elegant, not invincible, but reliable, adaptable, and present in overwhelming force. It reflected the strength of an economy that could turn blueprints into steel and deliver them across oceans. And it proved the enduring lesson of modern war that victory comes not from isolated brilliance, but from the ability to produce, adapt, and endure. Today, Shermans still stand in museums and town squares, not as icons of terror like the Tiger, but as symbols of triumph. They are reminders that in World War II, it was not the most powerful tank that won, but the one that never stopped fighting. In the end, the contest between the Sherman and the Tiger was never truly about which tank was better in a duel. On that score, the Tiger often prevailed. Its 88mm gun could obliterate a Sherman before the American crew even spotted it. Its armor could shrug off shells that clanged and sparked without effect. In a head-to-head encounter, the Tiger was the predator and the Sherman the prey. Yet wars are not decided by duels. They are decided by campaigns, by supply lines, by factories, and by the will to fight day after day. And in that larger war, it was the Sherman, not the Tiger, that proved decisive. The Tiger was Germany's symbol of engineering ambition, a marvel of power and protection, but also of excess. It consumed fuel Germany did not have, demanded maintenance Germany could not spare, and soaked up resources that might have built many more practical weapons. For every Tiger that rolled out of a factory, American industry produced dozens of Shermans. The Tiger could terrorize, but the Sherman could endure. One represented fear, the other represented inevitability. The Sherman was not loved by every crew. Many cursed its thin armor, its high profile, its tendency to ignite when struck, but they also knew it would start in the morning, cross bridges without collapsing, and keep fighting when the road turned muddy or frozen. They knew replacements were always coming, that if they survived today, there would be tanks to fight with tomorrow. That knowledge bred confidence, and confidence is as much a weapon as any gun. For German crews, the Tiger was a source of pride, a machine that made them feel invincible until it broke down, ran dry of fuel, or was swarmed and destroyed by superior numbers. For Allied crews, the Tiger was a nightmare, but a rare one. Most never faced it directly. What they faced, day after day, was the battlefield reality of advancing with Shermans at their side, knowing that they might not be the best, but that they were always there in strength. When historians look back, the Tiger is remembered as legend, the terrifying monster of the battlefield. The Sherman is remembered as legacy, the tank that carried armies across continents, that won campaigns, and that outlived its war to serve in conflicts for decades more. The Tiger dazzled, but the Sherman endured, and in the brutal logic of total war, endurance meant victory. The story of these two tanks tells a larger truth. In modern warfare, the ultimate weapon is not the strongest or the most feared. It is the one that can be built in numbers, maintained under pressure, and trusted by those who depend on it. The Tiger was the duelist. The Sherman was the soldier of an industrial army. And in 1945, when the smoke cleared and the war was over, it was the Sherman that stood as the true victor.